John Simmons and Shannon Tweed first met at the Playboy Mansion in 1983. He married her after 28 years. However, love was not the main theme of their 2011 wedding. It had to do with hiding a scandal that nearly brought his family to ruin. Conversations that were never intended to be public are revealed in a recently uncovered video from their reality program. A plagiarism scandal ensnared his son. Incidents involving female employees are mentioned in 2020-25 legal documents. There are now repercussions for the man who allegedly had sex with 4,800 women that go well beyond his outrageous notoriety. At one point, Gene Simmons wasn't Gene Simmons. On August 25, 1949, Cram Witz was born in Haifa, Israel. Flora Klein, his mother, had just escaped from hell. She had only managed to escape the Nazi concentration camps after being born in Hungary in 1925. Yochiel Witz's father, Perrin Once, also fled Hungary and wed Flora in 1946. With British forces still obstructing their path, they relocated to Israel in 1947. Shortly before the state was established. Pain filled their past, and it subtly permeated everything Chaim would become. Things worsened by 1955 when he was 6. His parents' lack of wealth was a major factor in the dissolution of their marriage. His father did not leave Israel. In Tirat Carmel, his mother reared him by herself. To support them, she sewed buttons in factories almost every day. Sometimes their dinner consisted of just bread and milk. Chaim was already attempting to assist at the age of 7. Together with a companion, I collected wild fruit and sold it by the side of the road. He understood the meaning of hardship. He used an army blanket to make his first winter clothing. He had no other option, but the cold didn't care. He frequently cried himself to sleep in an empty house because his mother worked till late at night. It didn't get any easier at school. He was teased by other children for being unusual. Some of the hatred his mother had fled carried into the classroom, even in post-war Israel. But he was also discovered by something else. American comic books such as Spider-Man and Superman became his haven. He made an effort even though he wasn't yet able to read English. He spoke Turkish, Hungarian, and Hebrew by the time he was 7 years old. And now, in order to comprehend the heroes in those comics, he was also surreptitiously learning English. He found solace in those stories in a post-conflict environment where food was scarce and hope was elusive. Although his mother rarely discussed her experiences, the anguish was always present. Chaim began to perceive it more clearly by 1957. At the age of 14, the Nazis made her work harvesting potatoes in fields as armed troops looked on. She moved between camps, wearing clothing with crosses on it, and watched as one relative at a time, her entire world disappeared. She didn't have to justify her quiet, her overprotectiveness, or the way she occasionally sobbed without cause. Chaim got it. Something was left in him as well, a must to never feel helpless, to ensure that no one witnesses him break. In 1957, Flora made a choice that would alter the course of history. She and Chaim, who was 8 years old, fled Israel with very little. They had no English, no money, and no relatives waiting for them when they got to Queens, New York. His father remained, got married again, and began a new life. He was never seen by Chaim again. He changed his name to Eugene Klein and began anew. He was amazed by TV dinners and flush toilets, but he found it difficult to adjust. Flora put in a lot of overtime, up to 15 hours a day in Brooklyn factories. Jean had to learn the norms of a strange new world and take care of himself with babysitters. For a period, he attended a Jewish school, but he didn't belong. He then transferred to a public school, earned a diploma in 1967 from Newtown High. Initially, children made fun of him for his speech patterns. Everywhere he went, his accent made him feel alienated. However, he was not broken by it. Sold door-to-door cacti. Like in Israel, he plucked fruit once more. He tried harder after each insult and rejection. By reading more comics and watching TV, he began to pick up English more quickly. His pop culture passion blew up at that point. In 1959, when he was only 9 years old, he legally changed his name once more to Gene Klein. He chose Gene after Gene Autry and other cowboy stars. Even though he still shared a small apartment with his mother and relatives, He was now fully committed to being American. He had a deep affection for television, particularly the Ed Sullivan program. Something ignited inside him when the Beatles made their appearance on February 9, 1964. That was the life he desired. He desired fame and the stage. On the inside, he still felt like the helpless youngster, but he wanted to feel like someone. In order to blend in, he even occasionally feigned Britishness by mimicking the Beatles' accents. It was popular with girls. His charm was gradually developing despite his awkwardness, uncertainty, and the chaotic transitions that come with being a teenager. Gene took any work he could find in the 1960s. He was a meat-slicing employee in butcher shops. He worked behind the counter in delis. Even though he only made $10, $25 per hour, he saved every cent of it. He had learned to count every bit from poverty. Even at parties, he avoided drinking. He observed how elderly men become careless and inebriated. He remained alert. It was how he acquired women. He himself said it. While everyone else lost their lucidity, he used his. He began studying the guitar and practiced all the time. He couldn't stop after watching the Beatles on television. While still in school, he began to build his future by forming small bands. He attended Sullivan County Community College in 1968. By 1970, he had earned an associate's degree in education and was earning $75 per week teaching 6th grade in Spanish Harlem. However, he wasn't passionate about the classroom. In 1970, he and Paul Stanley created a band called Rainbow, which quickly changed its name to Wicked Lester. They worked various occupations during the day and performed at clubs at night. Gene even had a job at a magazine about fashion. He also worked as a translator using the Spanish, Turkish, and Hungarian he learned from navy sitters when he was younger, but his soul belonged to music. He produced a few solo tracks under his own name and experimented with various sounds. Still bearing the burden of his mother's survival and everything she had lost in 1945, he continued to send money to her. Then came the part of his story that even his admirers found shocking. According to Gene Simmons, he lost his virginity in 1963 when he was about 14 years old. He was a little boy delivering newspapers. He called on the door of a customer one cold evening just before Christmas. She replied while sobbing and just dressed in a flimsy nightgown. She had been married. What came next? He went into much detail in his book. It wasn't the start of his sexual life. John Simmons and Paul Stanley formed a partnership in 1970. They formed a band called Wicked Lester with Steve Coronel, Brooke Ostrander, and Tony Zarella. It was an odd blend of rock and folk. Originated in New York City's erratic music scene. Jimi Hendrix had constructed Electric Lady Studios, where they produced a complete album by October 15, 1972. Even though Epic Records had spent a lot of money to make it happen, Don Ellis, their A&R director, detested it. He put it on indefinite hold because he thought the sound was too jumbled and odd for radio. Gene was deeply affected by the rejection. The project was dead before it had even started, despite the fact that he had put his everything into it. In a fit of rage, Jean and Paul shut down Wicked Lester completely, dismissed Steve Coronel, and briefly hired Ron Ludjack. However, it wasn't the end. To ensure that the old Wicked Lester tapes were never published, Gene and Paul paid $138,000 in 1977 to buy them back after Kiss gained notoriety. The hard-edged image they were now creating was in danger of being ruined by the previous sound. However, songs like She and Love Her All I Can, which Kiss would later re-record without giving credit to the original lineup, were later discovered through bootlegs that slipped online. Something greater was born out of that band's failure. By January 1970, Gene and Paul had reached their breaking point. Peter Criss, a seasoned drummer from bands like Lips and Chelsea, posted an ad in the Rolling Stone, which they discovered. He joined right away. After that, they discovered Ace Frehley via a Village Voice advertisement. The four of them came up with something completely different. This would not be your typical rock group. The show was going to be outrageous, full of fire, makeup, and imagination. They started Kiss because they were influenced by Alice Cooper's shock rock and the glitzy New York Dolls. On January 30th, 1973, they performed for the first time at the Coventry, formerly known as the Popcorn Club, a small Queens club. That night, John breathed fire on stage for the first time, and only 3 people turned up, including some of the band's female pals. It was an unforgettable sight. They gained popularity despite having no hit songs or MTV airplay. Instead of the radio, word got out through live performances and fan publications. They were performing as the main act at Anaheim Stadium in 1974 in just 18 months. According to Gene, their makeup was so unusual and memorable that it simply stayed with people. It spread, it was strange, and it was raw. The Demon was established in 1973. He painted bat wings around his eyes and began spitting blood and breathing fire on stage, drawing inspiration from comic book villains like Black Bolt and horror movies like Black Sabbath. He had been taught the techniques by an expert. The band had no particular plan when they first began experimenting with cosmetics. Horror was what Gene went for. Peter drew cat-like whiskers on his face. Ace transformed into an extraterrestrial Nage. They painted frantically as they stood in front of mirrors, attempting to create something that had never been seen before. Only a dozen people attended their early performances. Crowds at the Coventry were between 10 and 15, and occasionally much smaller. However, those few people continued to speak. Children were spreading the message even before the internet. It felt odd and sticky, according to Gene. However, it was effective. Frustration was transformed into curiosity by that makeup, fire, and blood. A radio hit wasn't necessary for them. All they had to do was be memorable. A man called Bill Aucoin saw Kiss perform at the Hotel Diplomat in August 1973. He vowed to secure them a record deal in 2 weeks since he had such faith in them. And he did. They signed with Neil Bogart's new label, Casablanca Records, by November 1st. Peter Criss literally fell off his platform heels with excitement at hearing the news. Producer Eddie Kramer assisted the band in recording their debut album in a short amount of time. The date of its publication was February 18, 1974. Were first slow, selling barely 75,000 copies. But the band persisted. That year, they performed at more than 300 shows. Despite Casablanca Records' near-bankrupt status, Kiss's relentless touring kept them afloat. At first, Neil Bogart was skeptical of their cosmetic trick, but he realized it was effective when he noticed the crowd swelling. Despite not having a single big radio success, they were packing stadiums in 1975. It was a gamble that made them legendary, according to Gene. In those formative years, Gene formed an odd habit. He started recording his sex with Polaroid cameras. As evidence, each woman had to produce a hotel key. In interviews, he boasted that he had slept with over 4,600 women and claimed to have taken almost 5,000 of these pictures over the years. He even showed his guests and friends the pictures. Jefferson Airplane Slick described it as repulsive, kept them all in a box, hidden away. That chapter of his life ended when his wife, Shannon Tweed, discovered them after they were married in 2011 and set them on fire live on their reality program. Despite never using drugs, Gene's sex addiction contributed to his outrageous theatrical image. He transformed turmoil into a performance and into power in venues ranging from tiny bars to enormous stadiums. Beginning on September 10, 1975, everything changed. Alive, their live CDs, was published at that time. It was full of their show's craziness, loud and uncensored. In every recording, you could hear the blood, the screaming, and the fire. During that year, songs were recorded in cities like Davenport, Detroit, Cleveland, and Wildwood. The album sold over 4 million copies and certified quadruple platinum on May 16, June 21, July 20, and July 23. For 110 weeks, it remained at number 9 on the Billboard charts. Casablanca avoided bankruptcy thanks to the record. Neil Bogart was even being sued at the time, but Kiss's success saved the company from bankruptcy. They were inspired by Slade's 1972 live album, which was referenced in the album title, Alive. It was evidence that the fire, the lunacy, and the makeup all worked. All of a sudden, they were more than just an odd band. They represented rock's future. They pushed harder in 1976. Under the direction of producer Bob Ezrin, Destroyer was released on March 15. The song Shout It Out Loud peaked at number 31 on the Billboard Hot 100 when he added strings, a children's chorus, reverse drum sounds, and sound effects. Ezrin didn't make it easy, but Gene's song God of Thunder was full of gloom and screaming. He threw out nearly all of the 15 demo tracks that the band sent him in August 1975. In addition to rearranging the music and writing their tunes, he also played the bass himself on Rock City in Detroit. Some of the songs were inspired by classical music, such as Beethoven's Sonata Pathétique, which was sampled for High Expectations. During a lull in the Alive tour, rehearsals started in August 1975, and recording sessions at Electric Lady Studios went on through January and September. Every victory boosted Gene's ego. Additionally, Gene ensured that his persona remained prominent as Ezrin refined the sound. The tours evolved from concerts to something more by the late 1970s. The shows were complete. During the June 15-16, 1979 Dynasty Tour, Ace Frehley's guitars shot rockets at smoke-spewing props, and Gene flew across the stage. These stunning effects were produced by their technician, John Elder Robeson. Cracks were seen despite their 92 North American appearances. Certain locations, such as the postponed Pontiac Silverdome performances or the scaled-down Los Angeles performances, were too vacant. Peter Criss was having trouble. His drug addiction worsened. He began ruining performances by pausing his drumming in the middle of a song to vent. It was self-destruction, Gene said. It was evident that the original band was disintegrating by the time of their last performance in Toledo on December 16, 1979. Disco had infiltrated their music, and fans sensed the change. Hardcore rock fans began to be replaced by families attending events. Jean continued to fly. The band was rapidly approaching. Things become more bizarre in 1978. On October 28th, the strange television film Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park was broadcast by NBC. The same guys who made Scooby-Doo, Hanna-Barbera, produced it. In a theme park, Kiss portrayed themselves as superheroes fighting a malevolent inventor. Improvised statements about dominating the globe, which echoed his actual strategy to make Kiss a household name. It was awful acting. It was disliked by fans. The rest of the band attempted to act as if it had never happened, but they loved the attention. People on the set were prohibited from discussing the film later because it was so embarrassing. In Europe, where it was retitled Attack of the Phantoms, it still became a cult classic. The endeavor demonstrated that Gene's ego was not only enormous, but also unstoppable. September 18 of the same year saw the release of solo albums by all four members. Some of Kiss's real group albums were outsold by Gene's record. Cher and Bob Seger made cameos, while odd covers like When You Wish Upon a Star were featured. His songs discussed twisted fantasy and radioactivity. I Was Made for Lovin' You peaked at number 11 on the Billboard charts when Kiss released Dynasty on May 23, 1979. It earned platinum in 5 countries and sold more than 1 million copies. However, the disco effect damaged their reputation. Ticket sales plummeted as rock fans left. Venues became smaller, the enchantment was wearing off. Before permanently leaving, Peter Criss only contributed drums to one tune. The fissures were now splits. In September of 1983, Kiss took the unimaginable action. On MTV, they removed their makeup in real time. They finally showed their true faces after 10 years of secrecy. They also released Lick It Up, which sold over 1 million copies and went platinum. The sound was more forceful, raw, and heavier. The risk paid off. Fans returned and sales surged. It was a rebirth to Gene. At that point, Hiss had made millions of dollars in merchandise with over 100 licensed products, ranging from lunchboxes to action figurines. The business was growing, but the masks were gone. Jean left music to pursue a career in Hollywood in 1984. In the science fiction thriller Runaway, he portrayed Luther, the antagonist. Michael Crichton, the director, was a crazy scientist who killed people using killer robots. Gene's dramatic delivery of lines and death at the hands of his own creations were based on his demon persona. In the meantime, Peter Criss was kicked out of the band in 1980 due to his unmanageable addiction. Necessary amputation, Gene said. The Fox, who was the new drummer, was Eric Carr. Although the loss was terrible, it gave them a fresh start. The song Forever from Kiss' 1989 album Hot in the Shade peaked at number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100. The music was gentle, more romantic than rebellious, but it sold over 500,000 copies and became their biggest success during the years when they didn't wear makeup. Sales contradicted the confusion of the fans. Behind the scenes, Gene continued to pursue victory. His personal concerns interfered with the band's performance. He was absent from sessions. He chose Hollywood instead of the rehearsals. Little Caesar was Eric Carr's final album before his death in 1991, but it featured his first solo voice. Everything was almost destroyed by Gene's diversions. Jean told the whole truth in Kiss and Makeup, his autobiography published in 2001. During his tenure in the band, he had slept with more than 4,800 women. The late 1970s saw one of the most outrageous tales. Between 1979 and 1980, he dated Cher, but he eventually fell in love with Diana Ross, her best friend. It began as a straightforward Christmas shopping excursion and developed into a major romantic triangle. They were never forgiven by Cher. One of the most well-known betrayals in rock history, the incident blew up in People magazine. Although Gene maintained friendships with both women, the harm was irreversible. Then the greatest twist of all occurred. The original members of Kiss got back together in 1996. The Cosmetics came back. Everywhere, the shows were sold out. They sold 1.2 million tickets, played 92 gigs, and toured in 75 cities. $143 million was made by the tour. However, there was tension behind the scenes. Jean and Paul received over $110,000 in earnings from each show, while Chris and Fraley received flat fees of $80,000 each. Then came lawsuits. Old scars came back. The achievement was genuine. However, the issues were also present. They were dissolving once more even as they were setting records. Gene Simmons allowed cameras to follow him on his reality show, Gene Simmons' Family Jewels, from 2006 until 2012. Fans were able to get a close-up look at his home life with his 2 kids and his partner Shannon Tweed, Sophie and Nick. After Dog the Bounty Hunter, the 7-season series was A&E's second biggest hit. The series mostly omitted Simmons' wild history, but it did depict him as a softer, more family-oriented Simmons. When a sex tape that purportedly showed him with another lady came to light in 2008, he filed a lawsuit, claiming that it violated his privacy. The biggest change, however, was when Jean married Shannon in 2011 after avoiding it for 28 years. The wedding garnered media attention. Even though the show's extravagant scenes, such as a fictitious offer to purchase an Australian football team, were ridiculed by some viewers, it succeeded in humanizing a man who was previously exclusively associated with chaos and cosmetics. Gene's corporate empire continued to expand. He has put the Kiss emblem on more than 5,000 items by the 2000s. It was present on everything from condoms to coffins to pinball machines. The brand was widely recognized. Over $1 billion was sold. However, he took things too far in 2017. Gene claimed to have created the well-known devil horns hand motion in 1974 and attempted to trademark it. According to his submission, it was a stance akin to the American Sign Language sign for I love you, with the thumb out and the index and pinky fingers up. The reaction was immediate. Metalheads were incensed. He was informed by critics that the gesture had been used long before Kiss by individuals such as Ronnie James Dio and John Lennon. Although Gene abandoned the endeavor a few days later, the incident demonstrated the extent of his desire for power. He was followed into other places by trouble. Victoria Jackson, a makeup artist for ESPN, sued Gene in 2010 after claiming that, while wearing a complete costume, he acted improperly during a 2009 SportsCenter appearance. She claimed he humped her and gave her a hug. Gene disputed it, claiming that was impossible due to his metal codpiece. To clear his identity, he even filed a countersuit. In the end, the case was resolved. However, he had other legal issues as well. He was accused of groping her by a dishwasher at his Rock and Brews restaurant in 2016. In 2017, another woman said the same thing. By 2018, both cases had been quietly settled. These cases added up and suggested a dangerous pattern, even though he frequently rejected them as unfounded. In spite of everything, his wealth kept increasing. Gene Simmons had a net worth of over $400 million by 2015. Music wasn't the only source of that. The mountains of Kiss merchandise were the source of it, continually touring and selling over 100 million albums. He and Paul Stanley started the Rock and Brews restaurant brand in 2012, and it has since expanded to several locations. Additionally, he became interested with unconventional endeavors such as The Vault, a 2017 compilation of rare recordings that cost $2,000 to release. Additionally, he became the chief evangelist officer of Invictus MD, a cannabis startup, in 2018. He accepted the L 2013 saw the formation of the KISS Arena Football Squad, which disbanded a few years later. And without even requiring the entire KISS setup, his solo tour by itself was earning six figures every show by 2025. In 1983, he started dating Shannon Tweed at the Playboy Mansion. Shannon. He knew Gene had a reputation when he joined his industry, having won Playmate of the Year in 1982. By 2002, he claimed to have about 5,000 lovers, but they continued to live together. In 1989, their son Nick was born, and Sophie, their daughter, in 1992. Gene would use Groucho Marx to make jokes about marriage being a trap, but his actions finally got to Shannon. She called him a pig and walked off the Joy Behar show in 2011. She discovered his collection of sexual Polaroids later that year and set them on fire. Fans were surprised by that moment, but something changed. On July 26, 2011, Gene proposed to her in Belize, and on October 1, they were married. Nick served as a groom. The tension was evident in their reality program. The pivotal moment occurred during season 6 when Shannon momentarily left the show due to a picture of Jean with two models at a 2009 event in Santa Monica. She claimed she was taken by surprise and never consented to be in an open relationship when the show followed them into therapy. At last, John revealed that his early life had left him with severe anxiety about commitment. Everyone was surprised when he asked her to marry him. Over the course of its 167 episodes, the show revealed more than simply their friendship. It revealed the suffering and strain that came with becoming famous. Gene's reputation as a fierce guy crumbled in 2018. At the age of 93, his mother, Flora Klein, died on December 5. Having survived the atrocities of Nazi camps and lost her own mother in a gas chamber, she was a Holocaust survivor. She raised Joan by herself after moving to Israel and subsequently New York in 1950. He constantly gave her credit for forming his morals. He was shaken by her passing. He encouraged people to value their mothers and referred to her as his moral compass on Instagram. Paul Stanley characterized her as extremely caring, and his wife Shannon referred to her as the best grandmother. I saw Jean sans the mask for once. Not even his kids were exempt from the limelight. The comic book Incarnate, written by his son Nick, was accused of copying the Japanese manga Bleach in 2010. Supporters requested accountability and made precise panel comparisons. Nick apologized and said, "The comic was intended as homage after the publisher removed it, but the criticism persisted." The artwork was criticized for being amateurish and for being too obviously copied. Defended his son, but the scandal followed Nick onto their reality program and hurt his reputation as a creator. In 2024, Gene's tendency to say exactly what he believes caused more problems. During a guest appearance on Dancing with the Stars on October 8, he made remarks regarding female dancers that many people found unsettling. He kept raving about how gorgeous they looked rather than their performances. For all the wrong reasons, a joke about Chandler Kinney fogging up his glasses went viral. People demanded that ABC apologize after he was referred to as the gross uncle on social media. Gene refused to give up. He stated he stood by everything he said in an interview on October 10. In April 2025, the fan box arrived. Fans could participate in the ultimate Gene Simmons experience, where they would spend a day as his roadie for $12,495, not including the ticket. They would be introduced on stage, assist with sound check, and even eat backstage. Get a signed bass guitar as well. Particularly during difficult economic times, critics ripped it apart, accusing it of being tone deaf and shameless. However, the package was sold out. The trip was paid for by one fan, a retired soldier who felt it was well worth the money. Nevertheless, the act rekindled discussions about celebrity avarice, particularly in light of Gene's fortune. That was hardly the end of the debate. President Trump declared Kiss's acceptance of the Kennedy Center honors on August 13, 2025. The fans were perplexed. In interviews just 3 years prior, Gene had denounced Trump as disgusting for inciting hatred. He even likened Trump's ascent to cockroaches emerging from the walls after January 6. Now, however, he was giving the band an award. Memes went viral on the internet, and charges of being hypocritical. Didn't say anything, but the quiet was quite telling. Simmons also resumed touring as a solo artist in 2025. He appeared without his typical Kiss protection at the Sturgis Motorcycle Gathering on August 3rd, sharing anecdotes from his 50-year career. However, not everyone was content. The VIP package offended some people, and some tickets cost more than $500. Due to poor sales, a number of dates were canceled by March 23rd. Supporters believed he had overreached himself by putting financial gain ahead of the people who created him. However, Jean maintained that without the enormous Kiss equipment, things were now simpler. During an interview on CBS Mornings on July 23, 2025, Gene broke down when Ozzy Osbourne passed away. He recalled Kiss's role as Black Sabbath's 1975 opening act and described Ozzy as a true egoless soul. Simmons sought to maintain a positive image for his band, and he even disclosed that Kiss once declined a tour with Sabbath in the 1970s due to their excessive drug use. Fans were taken aback by that fact. Despite his wild persona and shock value, Gene Simmons had always maintained strict control.